Hey everyone, it's Mr. Keys, and today we're going to learn how to take a random collection of notes and identify the key or keys that they belong to. The first step is to write down the order of sharps and the order of flats. Now we look to our collection of notes. This is a collection of notes that I've just chosen randomly for the sake of this video. The notes that I chose are C, F sharp, G, A, and E. If we see any sharps or flats in our list, we place a check mark above the associated flat or sharp in the flat or sharp order list. We have an F sharp, so I'll place a check mark above F sharp. We don't have any flats, so we know right away that we're definitely not in a flat key. Therefore, we can get rid of the flat order list. If we find natural notes, we should put an X above their corresponding sharp or flat in the respective lists. Since we've gotten rid of the flat list, we don't have to worry about that. We have a C natural, G natural, A natural, and E natural. So C sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and E sharp all get X's above them. We don't need to deal with the flat list since we know that we are in a sharp key already due to not having any flats. The sharp list is telling me that I have an F sharp, but that I cannot have more than one sharp because C sharp already has an X over top of it. We read the lists from left to right, and the total possible amount of sharps is always limited to where we find the first X. Recall from the sharp key signature video of the series that the only key that has one sharp is G major. We take the last sharp in the key signature and move a diatonic semitone upwards. A diatonic semitone above F sharp is G, and this is why we're in the key of G major. We can see that our list of notes are contained in the scale of G major, which is G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, with a repeated G to finish off the scale. Let's try an example where we get more than one key as the final answer. In this example, our collection of notes is B flat, F, A, and D. Since we have no sharps, we won't use the sharp order this time. Let's check off B flat in the flat order list, and let's put X's above F flat, A flat, and D flat, since we have F, A, and D natural. Since we have those notes, we know that we can't have F flat, A flat, or D flat. Remember, only one instance of each letter is allowed per scale. Going from left to right, we find our first X above A flat, which means that the most amount of flats that we can have will be 2. Our list doesn't tell us whether or not we have an E flat or an E, which means we have 2 cases. The minimum amount of flats that we have is 1 flat, and the maximum would be 2 flats. For the first case, we would have the key that has 1 flat, which is F major. And for the second case, it would be the key that has 2 flats, which is B flat major. We can see that our list of notes, shown in green, are contained in both keys. Let's say that by mistake we thought perhaps we could also have E flat major, which is the key with 3 flats. We would see that our list of notes does not support it because E flat major has an A flat and our list has an A. And remember, you can only have one type of A. In the next example, we're going to take a look at a list that has both sharps and flats using enharmonic equivalent notes. Our list is C sharp or D flat, A, B or C flat, and G sharp or A flat. Sometimes when we create a list, we're not sure if we should call the note by its flat or sharp name, so we need to list both options. For instance, for C sharp or D flat, the C sharp affects the sharp list, and the D flat affects the flat list. For B, or C flat, the B only affects the sharp list, while the C flat affects the flat list. When we have 2 choices, one always affects the sharp list, while its counterpart affects the flat list. For A, since it's a natural note with no enharmonic equivalent, it affects the sharp and flat list. Let's place our check marks and X's now. Put a check mark over C sharp and D flat. Put an X over A sharp and A flat since we have A natural. For B or C flat, put an X over B sharp due to the B affecting only the sharp list, and a check over C flat since it affects the flat list. For the G sharp or A flat note, put a check over G sharp and a check over A flat. Let's take a look at the sharp list first. We notice that the most sharps that we can have before we hit an X when reading from left to right is 4. The least amount of sharps that we can have is 3 because G sharp is checked off already. Even though we don't have F sharp checked off, we assume that since we have 2 sharps to the right of it, we probably have F sharp as well. Therefore, the 2 possible sharp keys are A major, which has 3 sharps, and E major, which has 4 sharps. How about for the flat list now? Okay, well with the flat list, we have a little bit of a contradiction. A is both X'd out and checkmarked. Since this contradiction has occurred, our notes definitely do not represent a flat key. Why? We can't have A and A flat in the same major scale. Every note must only be used once. So in conclusion, our only possible keys are A major and E major. Let's look at another example where we can have multiple possible key options. In this case, our list will be C sharp or D flat, F sharp or G flat, and E sharp or F. For C sharp or D flat, let's check off C sharp and D flat. For F sharp or G flat, let's check off F sharp and G flat. And lastly, let's check off E sharp, but we're going to write an X over F flat because we have an F. The less notes we have in our list generally means that we'll have more key possibilities to wade through. Looking at the sharp list, we don't know anything about G sharp, D sharp, or A sharp. But we do know that the most we can have in terms of sharps is 7, since B sharp does not have an X over it. The least amount of sharps that we can have is 6. Therefore, the possible keys that we have for sharp keys are F sharp major, which has 6 sharps, and C sharp major, which has 7 sharps. Heading over to the flat list, we can see that the most flats that are possible is 6 flats, and the least would be 5 flats. Therefore, the possible flat keys are D flat major, which has 5 flats, and G flat major, which has 6 flats. So, in this example, we have 4 different possible keys. One thing to note, though, is that C sharp major and D flat major have the same notes, because they are enharmonically equivalent to one another. On the piano, you would play the exact same notes for each scale, but you would call the notes by different names for C sharp major versus D flat major. This video is the entry point into figuring out keys for a song.